So what we're going to talk about today is what exactly is change management as an isolated skill? Why do we need change management? The options we have available to us around adoption and change management, the pros and cons of each of those, a comparison table so we can see them side by side, and the stumbling blocks on mistakes that are often made through the projects we see where the customers are making their own way. If you want to ask questions during the presentation, feel free. There is a chat option in your panel. Fire them in and then we will answer them at the end. So first of all, what is change management? This is PROSCI's definition of change management. It is the process, the tools and techniques to manage the people side of change to achieve the required business outcome. The key part to this is managing the people side of change. This is not about technology. It's not specifically about the solution you're putting in. It is all about how people react to change and how we get them on board so that they want to use the products. So to emphasize this, there's a couple of minutes of slightly tongue-in-cheek exercise, but this is a character called Ned. And Ned is a real character from history, and lived around the time of the Industrial Revolution. Now, during the Industrial Revolution, there's an awful lot of machinery coming into play, a lot of change going on, a lot of new solutions being put into the various workhouse and the textiles industry, for example. And as these changes were going on, Ned's friends, family, the people he spent his time around and in his peripheral were worried about the jobs, worried about the machinery, replacing them, etc. But Ned had a solution. Ned smashed up the machinery. Now, in the change management world, we would say that Ned is showing signs of resistance. Now, why are we telling you this story? Well, first of all, if you actually look into the points that we've put on the board for you to have a look at, you will see that it's Ned's friends, family, and community that are worried about the change. It's not actually Ned. Ned was actually quite lazy and a little bit of a good for nothing, and basically went out on a rampage, smashed up this machinery, and the anti-revolution jumped on him as a character to head up their campaign. This is Ned Ludd, who gives the word Luddite, people resistance to change. So the point behind it is, if we had approached Ned with a change management conversation, and clearly this wouldn't have happened, it could have gone something along the lines of this. The boss says to him, the industry is changing, we need machines to make us more competitive and productive, or we'll go out of business and you'll all use your jobs. To which Ned would potentially reply that he needs this job and the machines will replace him. So he's got his concerns. The machinery will take away the back-breaking work that you do and allow you to do more things that will bring greater value to the company, okay? No more back-breaking tasks. I can do important things for the company. Sounds interesting, but I don't know how to use the machines. Don't worry, you'll get full training and a consultation period for you to mull it over. So what's the point of this fake conversation? Well, when we talk about change management, and specifically the PROSCI methodology, it quite often gets boiled down to a process called ADKAR. The A is awareness, D is for desire, K is for knowledge, A is ability, R is reinforcement. So awareness, why are we changing? D, what's in it for me? How is it going to make my life better? K, I don't know how to use it, so we'll train them. And then the ability and reinforcement fall into actually using the product. So if we look at that conversation, in very simplistic terms, we've given Ned a reason why this is happening. We've told him how it's going to make his life better. And then we've talked about how we're going to provide him with training. But ADKAR is one piece of a set of tools that we have within this PROSCI process. So looking at the ADCAR process, and remember, this is just change management. This isn't adoption and change management. We have awareness. Why is the business changing? Why are we putting this change in place? That message needs to come from your executive sponsor, someone of seniority, to say, this is a really important project. We want you to get on board with it. It's the message of why the company's doing it and what's the impact of it not changing. The second part is awareness comes from your line manager. So as a line manager, I will influence the way that my team behaves. So we need to make sure that the message comes from the top for the corporate message, and then line managers and heads of department to the messages that impact directly on those users. The desire, if we can get somebody to see that there is a particular benefit to them using the tool that's going to make their life easier, they are more likely going to want to use the tool. If they can't see why it's going to help them, then we get into the realms of resisting the change. Knowledge. How are we going to educate people? How are we going to train them? How are we going to make sure they've got the right level of skills to be able to go ahead and use the tool set? The ability piece is actually getting people using it, and then the reinforcement is there to make sure that the people who aren't engaged with the product, that we go back to them and find out why it's not working, etc. In addition to that ADCAR process, we also look at the structure of the project. So we will look at the leadership. Are they visible? Are they active? Are they doing the right things to make this project really work and to address all those pockets of resistance or potential resistance? Is the project management set up in the correct way? Is the change management team set up in the correct way? If we bring all of this together, the projects will go on to meet their goals and objectives in line with what was expected. So what does it actually look like? Well, it looks like this. The top left-hand side, we have the triangle. That's the triangle that was on the previous slide. We get into the realms of scoring the project management team, the change management team, the leadership team. This is not to point out flaws. This is to point out where we need to strengthen and potentially build in additional support to it. We look at a risk assessment grid. What is the nature of the change? How big is the impact? What is the organization's approach to change? Are you very reserved and conservative about your approach to change, or are you more in the lines of, yeah, it looks great, let's give it a go? So we need to map out top right, it's high risk, bottom left is low risk, the other two are medium risk. We then go on to primary sponsor assessment. If you look at the grid in the middle at the bottom, it's got the green, yellow, and red, and talks about numbers 1, 2, and 3. We're seeing whether or not people are on board with the change, or whether they're a bit apathetic or against the change, and then we're judging them on the numbers about their level of competency. Do they know why it's happening? Do they have the desire? Do they have the technical understanding? So we judge people on that, and we put them into a grid like you see on the bottom right-hand corner, where we've got a color-coded organizational chart that shows where we will need to focus our efforts on. The bottom left-hand corner shows us that ADCAR process, and as we read it from left to right, the first number 3 or lower will indicate to us something called the barrier point. This is the point within that department or team where they are lacking, and it's going to be the first obstacle. So the top row, where it's 3, 4, 1, 1, 1, that 3 is that team don't have sufficient awareness as to why the project is happening. The next one down, they've got the awareness, they know how it can help them, they don't have the knowledge to use the tools. Am I worried about that? No, because I can train them. And then when we come down to sort of the bottom part of the graph or the chart, you'll see that there's a 4, 3, 1, 1, 1. They have the awareness, but they don't know how it's going to help them. So this helps us focus on getting the messaging right. The box in the top right, the sponsor roadmap, the comms plan, training plan, coaching plan, resistance plans, these are all components which will help deliver a smooth and successful project. So the sponsor roadmap, Your exec sponsor, how do we want them to behave? What do we want to see them doing? If you have an exec sponsor saying, use Teams, go and change your world, and then they don't use it at all, they just send email all the time, that's the wrong message. That's a conflict in what's coming out. So we need to make sure the sponsor is active and doing certain things. The comms plan, how are we going to communicate the changes to the users? There's two parts to it. One is this may be through many different media. The second part is that where you have a management role, that person is primarily a user. So we need to address their concerns and get them on board with the change. Then they will be in a position to manage the change of their team. The training plan, this is what kind of training we're going to deliver, whether it's classroom, online, snippet, bite-size, manuals, however it may be. But what training is going to be delivered, via what method, and when. Coaching plan comes back to the heads of departments. We want to make sure they're on board with this change. We want them to understand how critical they are to making this work. If the head of department isn't on board, it's highly likely the team isn't going to be on board. And then create resistance plans to look at how we deal with people who aren't on board or aren't engaging in the product set. So there's an awful lot to it. The reason that we do change management is this statistic has come from PROSCI, so I'm not taking credit for it. Organizations that put in projects in place, especially around sort of the transformational side, if they don't apply anything other than training, will stand generally a 15% chance of completely meeting the goals and objectives of that project. Applying change management to your processes, take that from 65 to 85% increase roughly. So it is a big game changer in how you make the training and adoption piece stick on a permanent level. Now, from our experience, we know that change management on its own is not enough. We know that training on its own is not enough. So the approach that we take is change management plus data, factual information about what's happening, and smarter ways of educating people. So we're going to go through 3 options now about how we address those combined efforts. We'll look at PROSCI, we'll look at training, and then we'll look at the ACM service. PROSCI, I'm not going to talk you through that slide again because you're going to switch off pretty quickly. The pros and cons is PROSCI is a really good process. It's very thorough. It manages change very well. It goes across all of your departments. But one of the big cons for it is the demand on time of your organization and the human effort required from the change team. So to put that into perspective, if we were to look at an organization of 70,000 seats and say that we needed to talk to 5% of the organization because that's the heads of department and managerial structure, based on that and being able to talk to 6 people a day, you would potentially be looking at 2.5 years of conversational time before the project gets going. With the likes of Teams and Office 365, the approach needs to be much more agile. These tools can be rolled out very, very quickly. You can go into your tenant, turn on Teams and push out the software and everybody's got it. So we can't spend huge amounts of time looking at this. It doesn't ever look at facts and trends. It doesn't provide the support you need for your IT desk and for your champions, because remember, this is a change for them as well. And it can slow down how quickly we can roll out projects. Training is the opposite end, really. Training is still a key part of adoption and change management. We can't avoid that, but we've got to use it in the right way. People who roll out just training, yes, it's low cost, and yes, we can distribute it very rapidly and across wide areas, but it doesn't address any of the adoption and change management principles. It's quite often a low uptake. People don't turn up to the courses, they don't watch the videos, they don't do, they sit there in the classroom maybe doing some emails whilst they catch up or they get distracted. It doesn't look at any facts, and it's very much looking at a sheep dip approach to education. So as we go through this ACM service, we're bringing together a number of components to make sure that this works at a very high level of adoption. So when we're talking high level adoptions, we're looking sort of 85 to 90% adoption minimum. So we include in the top left-hand corner the PROSCI foundations. We do all the change management workshops and make sure we've got the right people on board, the right kind of behaviors, and the right sort of structure for you guys to be able to just plow ahead with this with confidence. Understanding the technical change and impact, whether that's you who have come up with the solution as to what you want to change, whether it's us that's come up with it, we will spend time with the technical consultants or engineers to understand what's going to happen. In some cases, this might just be a change of tooling for someone, in which case it's an educational thing, but we're not changing their world radically. In other departments, this will be a complete culture shock, and we need to make sure that they get a more appropriate level of ACM to make them feel comfortable. The next row down has the 5 plans that we referred to in the PROSCI slide. So we have the sponsor roadmap. This is how we want your sponsor to behave, your exec sponsor to behave. We want them to be using the tool set. We want them to be pushing ahead and getting the message out to the user base, actively involved in the change so that people can see that they are using it as well as them being asked to use it. The comms plan, who's going to be communicated to, at what point, via what mechanism. That's really important. We have to make sure that people understand this. With change management, PROSCI say that you have to tell somebody something 5 to 7 times for it to fully stick in their mind. So we want to make sure that whatever we communicate, we're getting the message across thoroughly. The training plan, what mechanism of training are we going to do to which group at what point? And this is where we start to get a little bit more clever with how we train people. The coaching plan and the resistance plan can be quite heavy on the amount of effort that it takes to do. So we put those in as optional. We can do it, but it's not something we recommend. For us, the data on who's using what is more important. We then include heads of department coaching webinars. And this is the piece where we say to the heads of department, you are super important to this. You need to be on board with it. We need you to then support your team and your staff through this. So if you're not on board, you need to tell us now why you're not on board. Then we can address it. If you sit there and say you're on board and you don't use it, we will find out anyway because of the data. But we want to make sure that the support and the encouragement is there for them as well as for the end user. Champions program, super critical these days. The Champions program, there is some fine research out there that says that actually the most effective way of training people or people learning is through their peers. So we want to make sure that you have sufficient champions around, or power users, whatever you want to call them, around your organization who have the comfort and the knowledge and the skills to be able to help those people within their region through the change. Now, what we're also noticing is that champions are now firmly forming the first line of support desks. So people are going to the champions, and then the champions are taking things that they can't answer back to the IT support. So the champions program is really important. Training, we have a huge scale of things that we can do on training. This is just a few of them that we put in, but we need to make sure that we get a nice mix of classroom-based, online-based, bite-sized information, etc., to target specifically at the users. The ACM stats and data is where we really differentiate from other organizations. If we've trained users on using functionality A, B, C, D, and E, we want to make sure that they're using A, B, C, D, and E. If they're only using A and B, then we should really start to look at why they're only using those two. It might be that it's perfectly relevant that they don't use the other three components, but it could be that they don't feel comfortable on the training level, they don't understand how to use it, or maybe there's a piece of shadow IT that does it in their mind better. So we want to try and surface that to the top. And the way we do that is we pull information from Office 365 and we look at it in a very user-focused way. So I can see if people are posting messages within Teams, if they're having cross-team collaboration, if they're sharing documents, etc., etc. But I can also then take that data and automate it. So if I can see that somebody is mentioning me with the app mention 4 or 5 times in a particular team or channel, and I'm not responding, I can send an automated message to myself. I can send an automated message to myself. I know what I mean. To say, your colleagues are trying to get hold of you. You're not responding. And so we bring that right to the surface to look at it and say, okay, well, what's going on? If it's a repeated pattern that goes on and I continue to not respond, we can flag this back into the project team to say, okay, what's up, Pete? Why aren't you using it? So we don't leave things to guesswork. We bring the ability and the reinforcement of, are you using it? If you're using it really well, let's use you as a great use case. If you're not, then we look at why you're not using it, and we try and get to the bottom of whether it's a technical or a cultural challenge. And then last, we provide support to the IT services and champions, and that's basically done through, we give you a link to a chat. You start a chat with us, we escalate it up into a voice or a video call, show you how to do what it is that you need to do. So we provide your support desks and your champions desk with enough knowledge to feel properly comfortable out in the field educating people. Pros and cons, there's loads of pros. It is a comprehensive solution. It's got a big structure behind it. We're looking at dates, sorry, as I said, data and facts. We automate where we can and where it's sensible. We feed back into the project team where that makes more sense. But we're addressing resistance right up front. Cons, we don't have that huge in-depth analysis of department after department. But in my mind, that's actually more of a pro than it is a con, because we can move more rapidly. You put the 3 options side by side, we have quite clear demarcation on what is covered and what is not covered. So the ACM service gives you this full portfolio. The fail points, and then we'll go to some questions. Lack of exec sponsorship, it's actually really critical, and we see time and time again that the IT services team want to go and deliver this, but actually getting buying from the senior management team to say, yes, this is really good, doesn't happen. If they're not on board, it's going to be a much harder journey. Half-hearted approach to communicating the change. Yes, Teams is coming, it's going to be great, but actually they don't go through and reinforce the message in the way that we need to. Don't dress plain training up as ACM. It's not. If you're just doing training, then be straight and just say, we're going to go training, and then we'll, it's not the full service that you would really be looking at. Not looking at the data to say that people are actually using this. That's a key thing. Even at a basic level, I want you to use 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Are you using 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? It makes sense in my head. Address resistance really early, get people on board, find out why they're not on board. There'll be a reason. We just need to work out what that reason is. Don't sheep dip people. We want to say, if you're using Teams meetings, and that's great, and we want to encourage people to use video within Teams meetings, we'll look at the data and we can send a specific 30-second clip to that user to go, you're using Teams meetings, that's great, now use video. So target your training. Provide support to the IT champions and the IT service desk. And also, if you've got people on the team like the champions who are helping you, praise them, reward them, make them feel that they've made a big difference to the program, because they will make a big difference if you've got them on board. So I think we're on to 25 minutes. I cannot see any questions here at the moment. Does anybody have anything that they want to ask? Okay, I can't see any questions coming through. My contact details are available, so if you want to ask any questions after this, there will also be a recording. So feel free to distribute, and if you want to have a conversation in more detail about adoption and change management, because this really is a 2-hour conversation sort of slotted into 30 minutes, then feel free to get in contact with us and we can have a more detailed conversation. Other than that, I think I'm pretty much finished.